This is Unexpected with Hannah Love. In this podcast, you will gain a new perspective of how God loves you enough to call you to things that you couldn't have imagined for yourself. I know I'm guilty of saying this in episodes past, but I think it's worth saying again. We are all just one decision away from changing generations. To the woman with an unplanned pregnancy, you are one choice away from changing the history of your life and legacy. Generations will be affected by what you choose. To the one unable to take the step and leave the job and pursue what God has been calling you to, you are one decision away from a different life and a different future. To the one being called to homeschool your children, or to the one being called to move to a new place. To the one facing the choice of a secure job or blazing a new trail. The outcome will likely outlive you. Whether that be because you lived your life within the box or because you stepped out and built something bigger than you. Choices. They can be hard and heavy and overwhelming, but I'm here to tell you, it's those choices, one by one, that stack up and turn into a life and a legacy. Oftentimes, or really every time, these choices should be fueled by faith. In a world that revolves around security and success, faith often feels like a luxury we can't afford to count on. But what if, just what if it cost us much more dearly not to choose based on faith? Faith for what God has put in you. Faith for where He is calling you. Faith for how He will accompany and equip you. Faith to see His purposes for your life better than anything you could have asked or imagined for yourself. Today, I want to share the story of a woman whose choices changed generations. Not just her choices, but her faith to act based on who God is. This woman set aside what she may have thought of herself and made her choice based on who she knew God to be. A God who goes before and behind. A God and a Father who rescues His people. Today, I will share the story of a woman named Rahab. To lay a little foundational context, I'll give you a brief description of where we are in biblical history. So after the great exodus out of Egypt, and after wandering in the desert for 40 years, it is time for the Israelites to cross over the Jordan and begin taking the land. Moses has graduated to heaven and passed the mantle of leadership on to Joshua. And this is where our story picks up. Joshua 2, verses 1 through 24. Then Joshua secretly sent out 2 spies from the Israelite camp at Asasea Grove. He instructed them, "Scout out the land on the other side of the Jordan River, especially around Jericho." So the 2 men set out and came to the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there that night. But someone told the king of Jericho, "Some Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land." So the king of Jericho sent orders to Rahab, "Bring out the men who have come into your house, for they have come here to spy out the whole land." Rahab had hidden the 2 men, but she replied, "Yes, the men were here earlier, but I didn't know where they were from. They left the town at dusk, as the gates were about to close. I don't know where they went. If you hurry, you can probably catch up with them." Actually, she had taken them up on the roof and hidden them beneath bundles of flax that she had laid out. So the king's men went looking for the spies along the road leading to the shallow crossings of the Jordan River. And as soon as the king's men had left, the gate of Jericho was shut. Before the spies went to sleep that night, Rahab went up on the roof to talk with them. "I know the Lord has given you this land," she told them. "We are all afraid of you. Everyone in the land is living in terror. For we have heard how the Lord made a dry path for you through the Red Sea when you left Egypt. And we know what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 Amorite kings east of the Jordan, whose people you completely destroyed. No wonder our hearts have melted in fear. No one has the courage to fight after hearing such things. For the Lord your God is the supreme God of the heavens above and the earth below. Now swear to me by the Lord that you will be kind to me and my family since I have helped you. Give me some guarantee that when Jericho is conquered, you will let me live, along with my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all their families. We offer our own lives as a guarantee for your safety," the men agreed. "If you don't betray us, we will keep our promise and be kind to you when the Lord gives us the land." Then, since Rahab's house was built into the town wall, she let them down by a rope through the window. "Escape to the hill country," she told them. "Hide there for 3 days from the men searching for you. Then, when they have returned, you can go on your way." Before they left, the men told her, "We will be bound by an oath we have taken only if you follow these instructions. When we come into the land, you must leave this scarlet rope hanging from your window through which you let us down. And all your family members, your father, mother, brothers, and all your relatives must be here inside the house. If they go out into the street and are killed, it will not be our fault. But if anyone lays a hand on people inside this house, we will accept the responsibility for their death. If you betray us, however, we are not bound by this oath in any way." "I accept your terms," she replied. And she sent them on their way, leaving the scarlet rope hanging from the window. The spies went up to the hill country and stayed there 3 days. The men who were chasing them searched everywhere along the road, but they finally returned without success. Then the 2 spies came down from the hill country, crossed the Jordan River, and reported to Joshua all that had happened to them. "The Lord has given us the whole land," they said, "for all the people in the land are terrified of us." So we'll skip ahead a few chapters here. The spies did return to Joshua, and like I said, they filled him in. Fast forwarding a bit, an angel of the Lord's army comes and reveals a battle plan to Joshua. What proceeds to happen is now known as the famous fall of Jericho. Remember that Bible story we all grew up with the army circling the walls of Jericho, with the Ark of the Covenant and horns? Yep, this is it. And this is where we will pick up again in Joshua 6, verses 15 through 25. On the 7th day, the Israelites got up at dawn and marched around the town, as they had done before. But this time they went around the town 7 times. The 7th time around, as the priests sounded the long blast on their horns, Joshua commanded the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the town. Jericho and everything in it must be completely destroyed as an offering to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and the others in her house will be spared, for she protected our spies. Do not take any of the things set apart for destruction, or you yourselves will be completely destroyed, and you will bring trouble on the camp of Israel. Everything made from silver, gold, bronze, or iron is sacred to the Lord and must be brought into his treasury." When the people heard the sound of the ram's horns, they shouted as loud as they could. Suddenly, the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites charged straight into the town and captured it. They completely destroyed everything in it with their swords: men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, goats, and donkeys. Meanwhile, Joshua said to the 2 spies, "Keep your promise. Go to the prostitute's house and bring her out along with all her family." The men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father, mother, brothers, and all the other relatives who were with her. They moved her whole family to a safe place near the camp of Israel. Then the Israelites burned the town and everything in it. Only the things made from silver, gold, bronze, or irons were kept for the treasury of the Lord's house. So Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute and her relatives who were with her in the house, because she had hidden the spies Joshua sent to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. There are so many things to love about this story. The story of faith and redemption, and also the story of choices. This woman, Rahab, heard the stories of the Israelites and their God. Rather than shake with fear like the rest of her city, she heard and believed. The testimony of what God had done and continued to do for his people made an impact on her. She believed in what he had done and had faith for what he could do for her as well. It's hard to wrap our minds around today, but the watered-down version is this. Rahab was a prostitute, and one can only imagine what brought her to this point. History would imply that, as was common in that culture, she could have been sold or forced into this life. We will never know. But what we do know is this woman loved her family. She thought enough of her parents and siblings to want them saved along with her. She was bold in her ask, but I actually smile thinking her boldness matched her faith. I've often wondered if Rahab endured a life of loneliness and scorn by many, a life that could have held shame and abuse. But no matter what her circumstances were, she allowed herself to make a choice, not based on how she saw herself or even how the world saw her, but rather on how she saw God, the God of the Israelites. Her faith enabled her to step outside of herself and save not only her own life, but the life of her family. And you know the real wow here? Rahab is listed in the genealogy of King David and eventually Jesus himself. Think of it. This woman of ill repute was a foreigner, but in faith, she was rescued, redeemed, brought into the people of God, and included in the greatest legacy of all, that of our ultimate Savior. What a testimony, one that shows us how one choice can change generations. It is the story of rescue, mercy, redemption, and grace. God's purposes are greater than we could ever ask or imagine, if only we have faith to follow where He calls. Today, my prayer is that this story is the reminder and the encouragement you need this week. My prayer is that your choices are made in faith, not a faith based on anything that you've done or anything you're capable of, but rather your choices are made in faith because of who God is and what He is able to work in and through you with an obedient heart and the courage to follow where He leads. I love you all. May your week be full of faith-filled choices and God's goodness. Thank you so much for listening today. If this episode has encouraged you, please feel free to share the show with your family and friends. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world today, and my hope is that this show is a candle in the dark.